A lonely cowboy returned home during a deadly winter storm, only to discover a mysterious Apache woman hiding inside his cabin. What began with fear and suspicion soon became a life-changing bond filled with danger, courage, and sacrifice. But when ruthless bounty hunters arrived, the cowboy faced an impossible choice. Watch till the end, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and support the channel for more unforgettable Wild West stories. The freezing winter wind swept across the empty plains of Texas as Ethan Walker guided his tired horse toward the small wooden cabin hidden near the hills. Snowflakes drifted through the dark sky, covering the ground in white silence. Ethan had spent weeks driving cattle across dangerous territory, and exhaustion weighed heavily on his shoulders. His gloves were stiff from the cold, and his eyes burned from sleepless nights on the trail. All he wanted was a warm fire and a few hours of peace. But the moment he pushed open the cabin door, his entire body froze. Someone was inside his home, sitting quietly beside the firelight. Near the fireplace sat a young Apache woman wrapped tightly in an old wool blanket Ethan barely recognized. Her long dark hair fell over her shoulders, and her frightened eyes immediately locked onto his. The room became completely silent, except for the crackling fire and the wind rattling the cabin walls outside. Ethan's instincts took control. His hand moved quickly toward the revolver hanging from his belt. Stories of violent conflicts between settlers and Apache tribes had filled his life since childhood. Trust did not exist on the frontier, especially during those dangerous years. Yet the woman before him did not look threatening. She looked exhausted, cold, and terrified. The Apache woman slowly raised her trembling hands to show she carried no weapon. Ethan noticed fresh bruises on her arms and a deep cut near her shoulder where dried blood stained her clothing. She looked as though she had been running for days without rest. For several tense moments, neither of them spoke a single word. Finally, in a weak voice, she explained that bounty hunters had attacked a small group from her tribe near the mountains. Many had been killed during the ambush, and she barely escaped into the snowy wilderness before darkness fell. Lost and freezing, she discovered Ethan's isolated cabin and entered only to survive the storm. Ethan listened carefully, though uncertainty still filled his mind. Every lesson the frontier had taught him warned against helping strangers, especially an Apache woman during a time of conflict. If local ranchers or lawmen discovered her inside his cabin, they would accuse him of betrayal. Some men in town hated Apache people so deeply they would burn his home without hesitation. Ethan stared toward the raging snowstorm outside the window, sending her back into... That deadly cold would almost certainly mean death. The cowboy felt trapped between fear and conscience, unsure which path would destroy him less. The woman remained silent, waiting for his decision with hopeless eyes. After a long and heavy silence, Ethan slowly removed his hand from the revolver and placed the weapon onto the wooden table beside him. The Apache woman looked surprised as he walked toward the fireplace and added more wood to the flames. Without speaking much, Ethan handed her a bowl of hot stew and poured fresh water into a metal cup. She accepted both with shaking hands, clearly overwhelmed by the unexpected kindness. Outside, the storm continued to roar across the lonely Texas plains, but inside the small cabin, something had already changed. Neither Ethan nor the mysterious Apache woman realized that this single act of mercy would soon transform both of their lives forever. During the days that followed, the heavy winter storms trapped Ethan and Ayanna inside the isolated cabin on the Texas frontier. Slowly, the Apache woman regained her strength, the color returned to her face, and the deep exhaustion in her eyes began to fade. Each morning, Ethan noticed her quietly helping around the cabin, preparing food over the fire or gathering water from the frozen creek nearby. Although they remained cautious around one another at first, silence no longer felt uncomfortable. The lonely cowboy had spent years living without companionship, and for the first time in a long while, the cabin no longer felt cold and empty. As evenings grew longer, Ethan and Ayanna slowly began sharing pieces of their lives beside the fireplace. Ayanna spoke softly about her tribe's traditions, the songs her mother once sang beneath the desert stars, and the peaceful life her people had before violence spread across the territory. Ethan listened carefully, realizing how different reality was from the stories settlers often repeated in town. In return, Ethan spoke about losing his parents during a deadly fever years earlier and how loneliness had followed him ever since. Though their worlds were completely different, both carried pain, loss, and memories that still haunted their hearts every night. One freezing night, while strong winds battered the cabin walls, the sound of approaching horses suddenly shattered the silence outside. Ethan immediately stood from his chair and reached for his rifle hanging beside the door. Through the frosted window, he spotted several armed riders surrounding the cabin with lanterns glowing in the darkness. Ayanna's expression instantly filled with fear as she recognized the men hunting her tribe. Moments later, loud fists pounded against the wooden door. A rough voice demanded that Ethan hand over the Apache woman hiding inside. The hunters promised money and protection if he cooperated, but threatened violence if he refused. Ethan's heart pounded heavily as he stared toward the frightened woman standing near the fireplace. He understood exactly what helping her might cost him. If he protected Ayanna, he could lose his ranch, his reputation, and possibly his life. The men outside were dangerous and known across Texas for their cruelty. For several seconds, fear battled against conscience inside him. Then Ethan made his decision. Gripping his rifle tightly, he stepped outside into the freezing wind and blocked the cabin entrance. His voice remained calm but firm as he warned the hunters to leave immediately. The armed men laughed at first, but Ethan refused to move aside. A long and dangerous standoff followed beneath the dark winter sky. Snow drifted across the ground while both sides remained motionless, waiting for someone to make the first move. Finally, realizing Ethan would not surrender the woman without bloodshed, the bounty hunters slowly retreated into the darkness, promising they would return someday. When the sound of horses finally disappeared, Ethan lowered his rifle and returned inside the cabin. Ayanna looked at him with deep gratitude and quiet respect. No one had ever risked so much to protect her before. In that small frontier cabin, two wounded strangers discovered that compassion could overcome fear, hatred, and even the scars left by years of suffering.